Hello, my name is Robert Dorczak, and I will tell you today a little bit about myself, about my story of stuttering and stuttering therapy. I've been stuttering ever since I remember, since I was a kid, so it's been almost 30 years now. First, let me tell you a few words about what I do in life. So I'm a linguist and translator. I speak a few languages, mainly English, French, Spanish, and Polish, of course, because I'm Polish. I'm doing a PhD in sociology, so I have to sometimes give classes at university, and possibly in the future I will also have to give lectures in university if I follow an academic career. And I also work in public administration, so my work sometimes consists of, for instance, answering or making phone calls. And I think it's important to say all this at this moment because for many years, when I was stuttering, I thought that I wouldn't be able to do any of those things, mainly because of my stutter. I thought that any job that will require public speaking, that will require talking on the phone, was simply not for me because I stuttered. And starting from my early school years, I stuttered sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, depending on the day, on the period. But I remember that the biggest problem about stuttering at that time was not the visual aspect of it, so the blocks that people could hear, or for instance, I don't know, the facial expressions that I did when I had a block, but it was everything that was going on in my head all the time. So all the anticipation, all the stress before any situation where I would have to speak, for instance, in public, or any situation where I would anticipate that someone would ask me something on the street or in a streetcar, for instance, I would have to answer them and I would start to stutter. It was all this fear of being humiliated in public in front of many people when suddenly I wouldn't be able to utter any word out of my mouth. So for many people, it might seem that I didn't stutter that severely at that time because my blocks sometimes were less, sometimes more frequent, but not that severe. But this stress was killing me because this was the worst part of stuttering, and this made me avoid many situations in life. And this made me withdraw from many situations where I expected that public speaking, for instance, would be necessary. And this had a very negative impact on my life, I would say, because it, for instance, affected the choice of my school, my studies. First, I started some forms of therapy based on fluency shaping techniques. So it was named mainly a slow rate of speech. It was some exercises in articulation, easy onset, prolongation, and so on. And they had some effect in the room with a speech and language therapist. But then when I went to school, when I went to some other contexts, I would stutter again. And it was difficult to me to apply those techniques that I learned with a speech and language therapist because when I was stressed or when I wanted to sound natural, for instance, while talking to my friends, to my schoolmates, I didn't want to speak with, for instance, very slowly. I didn't want to prolong vowels and so on because I always felt that this kind of speech felt a bit unnatural. But at that time, I didn't know about any other method of stuttering therapy, so I thought that was the only way. And then I went to this very intensive stuttering therapy for 2 weeks, which was mostly just fluency shaping. And during this 2 week stay in this stuttering therapy center, we learned a completely new way of speaking. We would speak very slowly. We would have to do some tasks like, for instance, ask people on the streets with a very slow speech rate. And we would have to learn to speak like, again from scratch. Of course, as you may imagine, this new way of speaking sounded very unnatural to me. It was very slow. It would be immediately visible and audible that you speak in a bit strange way. And I speak naturally very fast, for instance. So for me, it was very difficult to speak that slowly. For me, it was very difficult to, for instance, apply those techniques in natural context because it was a constant effort to control my rate of speech, control the way I spoke. And it stripped me of all the comfort of communication, all the comfort of speaking. So even if I did not stutter for some time, didn't enjoy talking to people at all. And every moment when I had to say something was tiring, was also stressful. And there was also this fear that I would stutter again. And if I stuttered again, then it would mean that I failed. All those efforts that I've already put in this therapy have gone in vain because I stuttered again. Because the main goal of this kind of therapy is to cure stuttering, is to stop stuttering completely, to speak fluently. And now I understand this is a very, I would say, a very tricky idea. For many years after that therapy, I actually started more and more because I felt frustrated that even though I put so much effort in this therapy, in those exercises, I keep stuttering. So when I was at university, I had some situations where I couldn't speak at all, for instance, because I was stuttering so hard. So it was a very difficult, I would say, time for myself. It was also very depressing because I thought that I wouldn't be able, for instance, to work anywhere, that I wouldn't be able to pursue an academic career, which I wanted at that time. So for many years, I thought that I would only be able to start living fully when I stopped stuttering. And of course, it couldn't happen because it's not a realistic goal, as I know now. But I thought back then that this is the only way to live a full life, to stop stuttering. And only then I discovered a different approach to stuttering therapy. I started a psychotherapy, which was also focused on stuttering because my therapist also stuttered, and she specialized in stuttering modification therapy. And so she taught me those techniques of modification. And in the beginning, it was a bit difficult for me to accept that and to also use that because they didn't imply speaking fluently, but they just implied stuttering, but more fluently. So the stuttering was still audible. It was still there. It didn't disappear. And also she didn't promise that she would make my stuttering disappear. And in the beginning, it was a bit difficult for me to accept that because I thought that it's not possible to have a satisfactory communication and life without getting rid of stuttering completely. But then with time, I started to learn those new approaches, those new techniques. And I also attended some meetings of groups of people who stuttered. And I also attended some conferences and some meetings organized by Mrs. Katarzyna Świerska and by the University of Silesia. And I was asked there to help with some interpreting during making some interviews with international guests. And I was, of course, very stressed before this conference because I was afraid that I would stutter during those interviews, during this interpreting. But then I started to think that it's not that bad, actually, even if I stutter there, because this conference is about stuttering, so I can stutter there. Even if I stutter, it's nothing wrong. I have the right to stutter. And it went very well, actually. I was very satisfied also with myself because I sort of set this challenge for myself and I've done it. And after that, I started to think that actually it's kind of a stupid idea to think that I cannot stutter in other situations, in other places. That actually what makes me think that I can't stutter in other contexts, in other situations, that I could stutter normally during the conference and actually I could communicate freely and say everything that I wanted. So I started to think about it a lot, and it was after that moment that I started to accept my stuttering and to feel that actually there's nothing wrong with stuttering, that I can stutter as much as I want to, and that it's no reason to, for instance, avoid certain situations, that it's not a reason to, for instance, make some life choices, because I can do whatever I like, even if I stutter, because it's not a problem. So it was an eye-opening thought, I would say. And it also turned out that after I accepted my stuttering, I started to stutter less, because suddenly all the stress that I had in my head all the time, all this anticipation of stuttering suddenly disappeared, because when I felt that I could stutter, then why would I fear that? So it's been a few years now since I've had this eye-opening revelation, I would say, this epiphany. And now I can honestly say that I don't think about stuttering at all. I just speak. If I stutter, then I stutter, but this is the only thing to it. So the block is the only stuttering that I experience, not all those negative thoughts. I don't feel this anticipation. I don't feel this stress. So it turns out that actually you can live with stuttering. You can still stutter and do many things that require speaking in public, that requires talking on the phone. But the key is accepting yourself, accepting that you can stutter, accepting that you can speak however you like. Fluency shaping techniques can be helpful, but only if you first accept the fact that you stutter, accept the fact that you can stutter everywhere, that you can speak fluently or not fluently, however you like. And then some fluency shaping techniques might be helpful. For instance, to ease some of the blocks, to ease some of the stuttering, to help you speak more fluently in some situations when you think it might be important. But without acceptance, it's not going to work. The real goal of stuttering therapy is feeling comfortable while speaking, while communicating, be it with stuttering or without stuttering. But the real goal is to feel at ease while speaking, while talking to other people, while speaking in public, while doing anything in life that requires speaking, and not fluency. This will be my motto. The aim is not fluency, but is the comfort of speaking and the general satisfaction in life. Okay, thank you.